Welcome to our discussion for accessibility today. And we're going to share some thoughts on accessibility, some methodologies, recommendations. A lot of the laws and regulations will be through the lens of the United States, but some of it is really great to just know as well as overall principles. So what exactly accessibility? There's this book we are reading right now, and we'll introduce it. We're going to start doing a book club, but basically this book called Mismatch talks about accessibility. The moment when we need accessibility is when our reality doesn't align with expectation, whether it is through our five senses, right? Whether we see, hear, taste, feel, or smell, our cognitive ability, or our physical ability. And specifically, these can also be very complex. These can be either temporary, it could be permanent. Temporary could be if you're pregnant, if you had a baby, if you broke your arm, right? Broke your leg. And also these mismatches between expectation and reality can be invisible and visible, as we especially talk about neurodivergent identities and disabilities. And so really, I think, especially as designers, the challenge for us is how do we create products taking into consideration all the people around us and making products that are more mindful, more accessible, so that everyone can use it. And just wanted to, do I have a term? Accessibility is the means to give somebody access to a platform, a space, utility. In the United States, they're actually starting to classify websites and apps now as public utility items. And so before, what happened was with the ADA, American Disabilities Act, I believe, to eliminate discriminations for people with disability, they basically said you have to create the spaces, right? Malls, stores, shops, wherever you go, to be accessible for people with disability. And especially as we saw tech booming, Uber, Lyft, like all these different technologies booming, we saw also this advancement of things that we could do far surpassing laws. And so right now what we're seeing are laws starting to catch up and saying, hey, digital things also have to be accessible. And starting 2021 and beyond, at least within the United States, there's going to be a lot more cracking down being done, especially with much, much larger organizations. I believe there's a certain gross profit. Once you make it, you practically have to service within ADA guidelines. Otherwise, you get penalized from the government. And I think, especially as we think about ADA, it's very different between different countries, especially all around the world. And I think, especially in the West, there is a lot more priority being done on it. I definitely think Asia, especially South America too, is starting to catch up. And so I think these are great examples to see where we're headed. And although we can create products and we can become mindful, right? We're like, why aren't all websites accessible? Because in the world that we have, it is not just white and black. It's grays, all different hues of grays. And we live and exist in dualities. And these are tensions that exist that push and pull us to move in certain directions. And I think if I were to impart any knowledge on all of you all as designers, it is to really understand the dualities that exist in the systems around you. Especially when it comes to accessibility, it really isn't just because somebody doesn't want to do it, but there's many forces at play, and I will explain a little bit. And the first tension is this duality between innovation and utility. As you get, for example, let's say somebody gave you $1 million and they're like, okay, go create your startup. What is the first thing you're going to think of in your mind? You're going to be like, well, I'm going to put $1 million towards 3 developers, 2 designers, buy a bunch of teas, whatever. And you're going to spend it on ways that you can throttle your product to grow. But as we think about utility, we actually have to start taking away some of that so that we can create space for others who may not have access to the platform initially. And a lot of the times, designers will have this tension within themselves as to, okay, like I have 24 hours in a day. Where do I even allocate this time? And when we talk about accessibility, definitely this is a great way to start prodding into, okay, one, like why isn't my company not being accessible? What is existing around me? And two, how can I frame my questions so that I can understand what exactly are the hurdles that are in front of me at the moment? The next tension is between charity and profit. So this is the tension between money that you want to use to make more money versus money that you're going to use to create more equity in the world. And why this is also really hard is, again, right, let's say I gave you $10,000. I might go make a startup. Your first thought is going to probably be, I want to make that into $100,000 versus to think that you're going to allocate maybe $2,000 or $3,000 of that to create a product that is accessible to deaf and blind people. And again, especially as we think about businesses, imagine you just put on a hat and you are magically big boss lady, big boss man, big boss individual, whoever you want to be, managing a team of 100 people. And you're responsible for continuously growing the company, continuously grooming the company, and continuously paying your employees. And one of the things when we start allocating our resources and allocating our funds towards creating equity is to also understand that we are sacrificing some of the money we use towards innovation and creating more money that we otherwise would pay our employees towards these projects as well. Again, no right or wrong, but it's definitely how do we find a balance where we can sit in the middle. And then the last duality that I want to talk a little bit about is this duality between simple and complex. And as we talk about solutions, especially as designers, we want to assume everything will have a single solution. Oh my God, you're the best designer in the world. Oh, you did so well. Like, we want to hear that. I bet all of you smiled. Oftentimes we forget that the world is a very complex place and there's so many people who are unlike us. And with that, there are so many complex problems to solve. And so with this, instead of idolizing maybe this one-shot solution that's going to solve everything, right? Imagine or ask yourself, how do you sit within the middle and flow back and forth between this duality of creating simple solutions, addressing complex problems. And we often try to create these one single solutions. We see this happening in politics. We see this happening in companies, even how they set up KPIs. KPIs stand for key performance indicators. What are metrics that you use to determine if your company is successful or not, such as click-through rates. You think we're going to have this one-shot fix-all solution. And especially the danger of this when we apply it to accessibility is when we think all of a sudden we created an accessible website, we solved everything. That is actually never the case. Accessibility is a living, breathing organism that lives alongside of us. And really the ultimate solution is how do we allocate a certain percentage of our time, whether it's over the course of a day, week, month, so that we can create balance and harmony between these dualities. So as we think about mismatches, right? So mismatches, this misalignment between what exists in the world versus what is our expectation. When we solve for accessibility, actually, surprisingly, we end up addressing more than just a single problem. And sometimes we can find matches that we would never expect. For example, if we're creating a product that addresses somebody who only has one arm, inherently, we're also creating a solution that can also address somebody with an injury. They broke their left arm, they could only use one arm. Or a mother who is carrying a child and they are on the phone trying to order groceries with one hand. Another mismatch that we see work really well is when we create something that is for low vision impaired individuals, creating products that are higher contrast for them. We end up creating products that are much more useful within bright environments, there's a lot of sun. And as we think about Kindles, or even as we think about just any products that we create that is in the sun all the time. So I worked on a project a handful of years ago working with this Monsanto's competitor. Name I totally forgot. But anyway, basically it was creating an iPad app for agronomists. So they're scientists who go into the farm and they pick the leaves, they study it, blights, diseases, insects, to determine if you're in trouble or you're good. And they're always using the iPad in whatever weather that exists outside. And so as we think about products and where we use them, high contrast can be extremely useful, surprisingly, when we don't think about it too often. And then the last one that we typically see everywhere, right, which is captions, closed captioning. We see this being done everywhere on social media, which is awesome because it's great for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. But also, this is actually really amazing for people who are studying a language, who are studying, let's say, English, and they put on English captions and they see all the stuff that they can match now what they hear with what they see. Also, when we think about environments where we shouldn't be on social media, but we are, like crowded airports, or like when we're in classrooms, or when we're like in meetings, we look and use captions so that we can still try to understand what's happening in the video. And to summarize this slide, it is really being open to exploring how we create products for different disabilities and seeing how these may inherently open up the door for us to solve other problems that we weren't thinking of before. ADA stands for American with Disabilities Act of 1990, where they passed the law that says, hey, you must create space for people with disability, and also close this parentheses. Laws are really ways that we set up checks and balances for ourselves. Ultimately, if it were up to us and we didn't have to worry about laws and we just could be greedy and just focus on ourselves, yeah, cool. And I think this is the beauty of governments and systems, is so that we create spaces sometimes begrudgingly because of a bigger altruistic goal for the betterment of our communities. The second bullet, A versus AA versus AAA. So in the United States, this is a classification for accessibilities as it relates to web, how stringent it is. But letter A just says you have, these are table stakes, like you must have them. And over the past few years, AA has started becoming really the standard of what everyone has to hit now. Back then, this was like 5-10 years ago. It was just like, hey, just try your best. But right now, companies are actually getting lawsuits for not hitting AA standard. AAA is nice to have, but right now there's no legal necessity to hit it yet. So if you see these letters, to sum it up for you, just focus on AA as it relates to business as your core baseline, and AA accessibility needs will inherently include A as well. And then just quickly going through, W3C is the organization that manages the World Wide Web, and they have different initiatives. And one of it is called the WAI, which is the Web Accessibility Initiative. And under this initiative, which has a lot of different accessibility projects, they have WCAG, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guides, which is what we typically see AA, AAA with. Yeah? Cool. Awesome. And I think this will be good just to share with everyone who's here, just like some of the stuff that we're doing, especially as it pertains to these different grades and as we're creating digital products. So basically, this is 2.1, 2.2 is just talking about the evolution of WCAG guidelines. And so right now we are at 2.1, so it's gone through many different iterations. And the last update was 2018. And actually right now they're working on 2.2, which is going to launch this year. And it's really interesting. I'm going to walk through where we are at and talk through some of the new rules. And you get to understand like how rules are getting made. It's as we start to innovate, the stuff that become table stakes now become laws. So first, initially, it is really around how the websites and apps are programmed. So as we use screen readers and as we click play, It's reading all the code and the text as you had set up the different properties to. If you tag stuff as headlines versus body, for example, it will have different ways of expressing those depending on what emulators you're using. And also as we think through alt text. So alt text are different tags that you can put on things that aren't text. It could be video, it could be image, it could be music, just to describe what it is. Also captions, you can put that visible or invisible. And then also descriptions, you can add different description tags. And when you're programming and creating code, they're typically called ARIA labels that you add as different tags to different elements on your website. Sometimes if you create an element and the way you coded it is just not reading properly, sometimes you have an ARIA label that helps to announce, if you're using a screen reader, what it is. For example, if you create a form field, you would have all the labels, right? Boom, going from top down with all your different labels. But if you don't have the text that says form field, if you're using a screen reader, you're not going to catch it. So typically people will use these invisible descriptors throughout the page to help screen readers announce what specific sections are. And we're still talking a little bit about coding, but this pertains to structure, keyboard control. Typically, if you enter a website and you hit tab, technically that's supposed to enable accessibility controls. And there's many different ways that they're trying to innovate this with different plugins. Structure, this is around how we label certain objects on a website or app or whatever it is. More than just headline and body for typography, but things that are articles, things that are recipes. And what's really beautiful is search engines leverage accessibility tags to help them crawl better your website or app that you create. So inherently, actually, when you create things that are more accessible, you actually have an easier way of getting your products indexed better in Google. So recall, like when you search stuff on Google, you get these like recipes with all the stars up level. You're like, oh my God, this is so useful. It's because they had to tag all of that accordingly. But if you just had all of that as just Lone Ranger objects just floating in midair, Google will not be able to crawl that intelligently. And Google is also starting to tag or pull attributes from YouTube videos, right? You search and you see how it just like shoots you, right, to certain sections of a video. It's using different timestamp markers so that it can use that to help point people into the right direction. Also, Google and many search engines are evolving in a direction where they are starting to now personalize the way that you are getting your search results. Total Web 1.0, 2.0, we used to use these like meta descriptions, a headline, right, of the pages, and then that's what we see in the results. But actually, search engines are moving towards a model where based on what you search in the search engine, it's actually pulling out the most relevant bits of that page and putting that as your search result. And so why this is important is two parts. One, these meta description, meta tags that we used to do aren't really as relevant anymore. And two, it actually makes all the tagging and all the little intricate things that we do all throughout the page even more critical. Yeah. And then just going quickly through, color contrast is really important for accessibility. How dark and light text sit with the foreground and background colors. Text 200%, meaning if I increase text to 200%, it should not disrupt the template that exists on the page that I see. No image text, meaning when image doesn't load, you should have a comparable replacement item that shows up that shows you the alt tag or whatever it is that showed. Focus, meaning if I click on something or I hover over something, it should show me an indicator of something that I'm interacting with. Language selectors, so I can toggle languages very clearly, providing context into some of the actions that I'm taking with error states, success states, and then also labels we just mentioned with different markers throughout the website. And feel free to shoot any questions too as I'm talking about this. Helpful? Yeah? Yeah? Yes. Okay. And then I think this will be really helpful to see where we're moving towards with accessibility. So 2018, that latest update basically said a bunch of other rules now. They said, actually, the first one is screen orientation needs to be a new rule where people should be able to switch the screens without compromising their experience of the product. Right. Yeah. You're like, oh my God, we don't really talk about this. It's because it keeps updating. Again, it's like this living, breathing document. It's not a once and done thing. Also, auto form fields is an accessibility requirement now. As you're typing and you start writing out your name and everything can be like, oh my God, amazing. Start typing your credit card. You're like, awesome, amazing. That's the bane of my existence. Yeah, this is actually becoming a requirement because they understand people who have disabilities don't want to be tapping every single letter if they already have it saved in the system, which is awesome for them, but bad for our wallets. Also, I don't know why I put image contrast again. Maybe it's a little deeper contrast, but text spacing, this is another one where it's actually starting to become really important on the space that we put around text, paragraphs. Now, that wasn't the thing before, and there's a minimum requirement now. Yeah, Aria, totally. Yeah. Screen orientation. Inactivity. So actually, before you exit out of a session, you must tell the user that you are going to exit them out of a session. So that's another accessibility requirement. Motion, they're starting to identify what is too much or too little motion, meaning if it's too much, there needs to be a way to be able to not have it on. And also too little, meaning there needs to be a way to indicate certain things when we interact with it, focus states. There we go. Target size. So this one is not really, it's still AAA, but I guarantee it's going to be more of a standard practice. But where they're moving towards is a 44 by 44 tap target space. It is unfortunately really big. So what that means is links and anything that you tap on cannot have any other links within a 44 by 44 pixel space. So if you put buttons together, or the toughest part with this is when we have a list, right, of text and they're just link after link, that is not 44 by 44. You actually need to bump up the space above and below the text now. And then status message, they're creating more rules and some thought around what are other errors and success messages that can exist, plus also what are some ways that we can help people. And where we're moving towards in 2021 now is error suggestion. So not just, hey, this is what's wrong. They want to standardize your ability to be able to correct the error, saying you can't just tell them what's wrong, you have to tell them what they can do to fix it. Interesting. The next one is finding help. So there must be a clear way that you can access contact me, a chatbot, different means of communicating with a machine or a human individual to get help. And then this one I thought was really interesting, consistent nav and components. So they're actually starting to put rules in place where they want you to create design patterns and design language because that helps accessibility. Instead of having 100 different buttons and CTAs, actually one type and making it consistent across actually reduces cognitive load for people. So this one's really interesting because, yeah, they're trying to standardize this as a part of accessibility practice. And they're saying, hey, make this consistent with your navigation. It will probably trickle out into making it consistent with the footer and also starting to make components, elements that we use on the page more consistent across the system. Yeah. When we talk about history, it's really interesting now, right? It's all of these are always iterating alongside our innovation, and really just go in, take a look at just where we're at and how we evolve. And as you start to understand, you can start to even predict where we're headed towards in the future. Yeah. Yeah, 48 by 48, Aria. That, I give you props. I cannot do that. That is really big, but we should. And as we talk about when we enter a space and we want to work with others and we're like, yes, like I want to bring accessibility into the conversation, I share this spectrum as a way to start working on some stuff that might not be as triggering. Yeah, for lack of a better term. And so invisible accessibility elements, these can be all done through programming, through code. And these are things that can be done on the back end. Yeah. Like the way you're tagging stuff, adding alt text, like all this stuff. And my recommendation is, especially when you're working with an organization or people who aren't prioritizing accessibility, don't start with the most visible elements first and be like, I'm going to come and shake up this whole system. It's terrible. We're going to have a new website. It gives them a lot of anxiety. They're like, ah. And so, yeah, this is a great way to focus on what are the smaller things that you can address first. But you're also going to win so many points with it. Just even correctly tagging elements throughout the page, that is helping SEO, it's helping indexing, it's helping screen readers, it's helping so many different ways people are using these tools. And as we think about, as we move upwards, keyboard control, focus, the next one is just copy, right? Just what is soft copy elements that we can be more mindful of? A big one is when we create CTAs. We love to say, click here, learn more. And this is really hard for a screen reader to pick up because it just says, click here. So they encourage people to add context into where you're going to drive them to or what their goal is that they want to accomplish by clicking that. We're also moving away from telling people to click and tap. And that is very Web 1.0, where we used to have to say to people like what to do because they didn't know how to interact with devices. And so we would have to say like, tap over here because people would literally not know what to do. Blow on it? I don't know. One more thing that I like to point out that I learned last year was ableism language when we talk about copy. And one of it is for people who are blind, who cannot see. And so we often have the words view more, read more, see this. And we use these verbs that are very ableist, meaning it's not very inclusive, meaning it's for everyone to feel that these words relate to them. And so as you're working through your apps and your products, see if any of these verbs show up with ableist language. Do this, or it's usually see, view, read, stuff like that. Let's see. And with success error messaging, we talked a little bit about that. Then moving on upwards, right? UI styling. So this one is really just not like huge overhauls, but what are some little things that you could start to make consistent across the system? Start with the color contrast, start with typography even, just like little bits and pieces. And ultimately, this is a conversation, and it is a very triggering conversation because as you go up higher and higher in management, there is litigation involved, and there is money, and there is lawyers, and sometimes a lot of new designers don't know the intricacies behind it. But if I'm working with a client per se, I cannot say this is accessible and completely compliant without me actually going to a lawyer or going to a firm to actually get it completely skimmed from top down. Because actually there have been cases in the past where somebody has checked off and said, this is accessible. And then somebody sues a company and the company is like, no, this consultant told me it was accessible. And then now the onus is on you. And so it's really tricky when we talk about legal terms. And this is just going to get more and more complex in the future. My tip with this, don't sweat it too much. Just be careful with your language and not sign off on things as accessible without an accessibility expert. Definitely, you can use the terms like, I would like to be more accessible, creating more accessible products. This is a more accessible website, and just not be the one to sign off on it unless you are the one feeling like you are legally bulletproof. If you are, come to me. I have so many jobs for you. Yes. Helpful? Yes? No? Maybe? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Question. Oh, whoa, didn't think about ableist phrases. Yeah. Do you have suggestion on what to use instead of view more? Same question as Karen. So yeah, I would just say goal specific or context specific. So if you're sending someone, right, to do something, what are they trying to do? I think it's, are you talking about like the accordions? Yeah. Like when you click an accordion, it's read more, blah, 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 blah. I think you could just say expand, or just even say like more, and just remove the whole like read. Yeah. We like overcomplicate things sometimes for ourselves and we don't know. It's just make it simple. Go back to basics. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That help? Yes. Anyone else have any other questions? Helpful? We are rounding it out. And then in the design process, really quick slide, you have these different phases, right? In the research phase, design iteration phase, deploy and test. Know that there's so many different opportunities to invite diversity, different thoughts, people into the space to help you think differently about products. The more diversity you have, it opens up the space for different ways of thinking. Some principles, I think the first one is lead by example. This one is a practice that I put into my waking day every single day. And when it comes to what we want to see more of in the world, sometimes people don't know what should be there. And so they're looking at people to help show them. And so when it comes to making accessibility important, how do you make accessibility important in your work? And when you do, you can be an example for others to follow as well. The next one is start small. Don't go after this with a whole like 500 pound machine and just like trying to accomplish all at once. You just burn out. And again, this is a living, breathing thing that's always going to be with us as our technologies evolve, industries shift. And so when we can create a relationship with accessibility as a practice, it becomes a part of our work day in and day out. And then along the lines of that, number 3, finding balance. I put this chart here as just like something to think about as we think as designers, like how do I structure my day? And there's so many different ways that we can slice, but I think this was the really simplest way, which is thinking about innovation, inclusion, and iteration, right? Innovation, thinking outside the box, bringing in new kind of thinking. Inclusion, these are creating things to be more accessible, equitable. And then iteration, taking what you have. It's not throwing it out because you're like, I need to innovate, but it's like using what you have and evolving it. And as designers, it is really creating this balance between this triad that you can then be extremely successful. When we over-index on one, then that is when we become blind to the other 2 parts of our discipline. And when we can go back and forth, whether it's a cycle or whether we just allocate certain times of our day, just think in these mindsets, we can start to be more mindful with our work. And then just to wrap up, some recommendations. I highly encourage everyone to check out Microsoft, the work that they're doing. It's awesome, awesome, awesome. They just great work with inclusivity and just some of their perspectives on it. And just compared to all the tech companies, really a great leader in this space. Methodologies, toolkits to check out. A11Y project. So this one is a website that is dedicated towards making accessibility more user-friendly. And they help translate a lot of the complex, all these sheets of all these requirements into something more palatable, easy to understand. An app and a little hint into the direction that we're moving towards as an industry is leveraging plugins that we integrate with our website. So this is an app, or this is a plugin. So imagine like a chatbot is a plugin, right? So this is a plugin called UserWay that has a little accessibility icon. And when I click it, it expands this pop-up out. And actually with the pop-up, I can do all of these crazy nifty things. And this is a really great way for website owners to include accessibility without really having to do a lot of work if they haven't taken care of it yet. Another great example is Accessibility. I think it's no L, Accessibility. And theirs is a lot bigger, more extensive. They even have a version where you can click read-only mode, and it literally strips off all the formatting of the website, and it just text. It's just text for you to read. And I think that's the direction that we're moving towards. And it's great because, especially for people who are across different spectrums, who have different needs, people are going to need to use something that is a lot more simple rather than us trying to find these solutions that are trying to fit within these different spaces. And I think my personal prediction is we're going to move in a space where we'll have a website or an app, and there are different buttons and toggles we can push that will then transform that entire experience into whatever service that we want to make more, or whatever accessibility we want to address, versus we have this one design that's trying to solve for everything. Because right now, people still want to innovate, but they're finding accessibility to be extremely difficult. And I think the solution that we're moving towards is similar to this, but we switch. Yes, you got it. Awesome. We create these micro websites, micro instances based on different needs. Huge tip, if you have time tomorrow and Thursday, AXCon, Accessibility Conference, is actually running, and they have awesome workshops. Sorry, not workshops, lectures and talks that you can attend. Perfect timing. I'm so good. No, I just by luck. There's a lot of heavy hitters here, and some people I've worked with in the past, just like really great visionaries as it comes to accessibility and work in the field. And I highly encourage you to check out some people there. And as you check out people, maybe you follow their work, doing really amazing stuff. And then the last shout out I'm going to do is we're going to start a book club with our organization. Yeah. So we're doing a book club. Yay for all these people who are in the book club. And if you're interested, join our Slack. We haven't launched it yet. Wanted to make an announcement first. And basically what we're going to do as a first book is read Mismatch by Kat Holmes, which talks about mismatch and different ways that we can create more innovation with accessibility. Yeah, if you're interested, come join or send an email to us, info@QTBIPOC.design. Yes, and so with that, I'm going to give a few minutes. This was a lot. Hopefully that was helpful. Do you have any questions? Just linger in your mind, anything that is starting to bubble up for you, anything that maybe like resonated that you maybe learned.
I love how you were talking about finding solutions for one situation, yep, and there's a matching situation with other demographics, and I would think that's part of the innovation part as well, that just those discoveries. I really like seeing those connections.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, by Taylor. In the book that we're reading too, they talk about personas and spectrum of personas and thinking about these temporary versus permanent disability and accessibility needs as different lenses we can even see our personas through. So really interesting ways that people are really, I think they're like revolutionizing these like really archaic personas that we've been doing to be more mindful of reality. Yeah. Yeah, definitely check the beginning, Arya. Helpful? Yes. Did it make you, for those of you working at companies, makes you understand a little bit around just like maybe some of the struggles your company's going through or other team members when it's not being addressed? I think it's a real big frustration for a lot of people. Like, yeah, I'm so angry, it's not accessible. Yeah, everyone's just, trying their best in this complex world to survive, live their fantasy. And it's about how do we facilitate these conversations, especially with these difficult conversations that might be really triggering for some people. Yeah. Yes. Everyone's faces on hiding. I can't see you. Yeah. I find myself getting upset at apps I use when it's not accessible, especially health ones. But yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard too. Imagine put on your startup hat. Like, I give you $10,000, go start an app. How much of that $10,000 would you feel comfortable dedicating to accessibility? I mean, it's really tough, and people have to figure out what is important for them. And sometimes it's about growth, fundraising. It's sometimes people really need to hit the next seed round of venture capital funds, and they just have to get a certain number of registrations, growth, and If they don't, then the whole company dissolves and then the whole startup goes away. And so sometimes it's not really accessibility that they don't want to do, but rather they're just prioritizing something else. Yeah. How would you advocate for accessibility when senior management, senior leadership at a company don't necessarily see its value? Yeah. I would start small. Remember the invisible spectrum, and there's a lot of benefits too. And the easiest benefit that I usually win with clients is search engine optimization. Yeah. Google is leaning more and more towards accessibility methods to help them index and archive data better so that information can be surfaced up to their users more efficiently. And with that, by improving your accessibility, at least from the invisible, like really simple stuff, it will automatically already gain more points with Google for free. And a lot of business people want that. And I think some of it is really just understanding what are they prioritizing and why versus why aren't they addressing accessibility. It's whenever I'm in meetings where we disagree, I'm just reminding myself it's a matter of different priorities rather than malice sometimes. And see, is it growth, right? And see what they're prioritizing and then layer accessibility and the wins of accessibility in the lens of what they're trying to reach. Yeah. So if it's growth, right? Organic, paid growth, right? SEO, improving indexing, like this is going to help with reach. As we think about what else is like another major KPI, it's like audience growth, audience satisfaction. That's another one. Shoot, what was that? What was the name? Neiman Marcus number? What was it? Oh my God, this is really bad. I should know this. Is it NFT the crypto art? The Net Promoter Score. There we go. Yes, there we go. You got it, Clarissa. Neiman score. Neiman Promoter Score. No, I used to go to a club and I used to have a promoter. His name was like, it started with an N something. I think that's why. It's like Ned or anyway. Yeah, Net Promoter Score is basically the index of how satisfied your consumers are. And it's a qualitative measure of different attributes. And sometimes a company, the goal is to boost that. And a way to also help boost is to make things more accessible, make things more easy as well. Yeah. Does that help, Ravi? Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Yes. Non-fungible token. Yes, Francis. You got it. If anyone wants to give me one, I would happily accept. For those of you new, I sometimes like go ramble like the most random things. So yeah. Hopefully you find it entertaining. Some people think it's crazy. Well, a little crazy, right? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Awesome. Cool. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Kenny for activity. Karen has a question. I wonder with the matching reviews, one-arm injured mother's child, have you framed it as more accessibility, more use cases, more money? I would say it's really tough when you try to, the case that they usually have is there's more money with majority. So that's why they target the bigger market sizes because they usually have more money. Yeah. The part about money and profits is really tough. It would either be people you have not reached before yet. Yeah. Or it's reducing costs. That would be another way versus it makes money. They're always going to argue you have more money to be made from the majority. They usually just target very broad demographics who are more able bodies who have jobs. Yeah. And there's a huge staggering statistic too, where I think only 30 or 40% disabled folks can have like full-time jobs and everyone else struggles. with employment. It breaks my heart. Yeah. This is why we need more diversity in design. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, Mahal, you totally got it. Kenny, over to you.
Alrighty. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop the recording here if that works for everyone.